Camarón que se duerme se lo lleva el corriente. Literally speaking, the shrimp who dozes off gets carried away in the current. More figuratively, seize the day. No better time than the present. Or maybe you snooze, you lose. El refrán. It's a kind of popular saying or proverb in Spanish. Refranes are great for taking the study of Spanish or any language a step or two beyond the basics, and so to open the door to a whole world of artistic creativity for which a language can be used to illustrate. El refrán is also good for the simple folk wisdom which is always contained within it. And for this reason, if you happen to do TPRS, el refrán makes a great moral of the story with which to conclude your stories. Cuando ronca el tigre, no hay burro con reumatismo. Literally, when the tiger growls, there is no donkey that has rheumatism. In a more figurative sense, when the person in charge says there's a crisis, everybody moves. Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me with whom you hang out, and I will tell you who you are. This one reminds me of a passage from chapter 6 of the Gospel of Luke, verse 40, which reads as follows. The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. In context, this had to do with an admonition that Jesus was making to his disciples about the Pharisees. That's the Jewish leaders who later crucified him. He was addressing specifically their legalistic attitudes and false outward religious piety and how it can rub off onto others around them who do not understand it for what it really is, who do not take it with a grain of salt. More in general, we see here a principle, and it's a principle that speaks to the great deal of influence which a teacher bears the potential to have on anyone who is their student. Remember, a teacher is more than just someone who parrots their knowledge in front of a group of people. A teacher is someone who sets an example to others who follow them in ways that the persons who follow them are impacted or inspired. And though Jesus did mean it in context for this to be an admonition, in a more general sense, it's not always necessarily a bad thing. It can also work for good, and even for the very best. The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. As I was preparing this meditation, I thought of two men in my life who have inspired me in this way. The first one is my first Spanish teacher who I had back in high school 30 years ago. We called him Don Gary. Though it was several months into the class, it was there where I really discovered my fascination for Spanish and language learning. He was always there to guide me and encouraged me along. He was never too busy to answer a question. I remember when I got to the point in my language acquisition journey where I could tell jokes in Spanish, I used to stop by his office when he was in his office hours and tell them, and I remember how he always appreciated them and laughed at them. And after I graduated from high school and went on to the university, which was actually just a few blocks from where I went to high school, I still, from time to time, dropped in on him just to catch up and see how things were going. And it was by doing so that I made an arrangement with him to volunteer in the language department at the high school, both in correcting assignments and also tutoring students. I remember how thrilled he was for me when I first got accepted to study in Spain. And also more recently, when I passed my interpreter certification. Today, we are still in touch via email, and I still ask him questions from time to time about things in Spanish as they come up. He is someone with whom I invested time, and today, many years later, it's still an investment from which I reap returns that are quite significant, considering what I do today. The other person that I'd like to talk about is a friend of mine by the name of Tommy. Tommy is an example of someone who loves the Lord and loves people. And this is evident in how I always see him reaching out to people whenever I go to visit him. He and his wife, June, were missionaries, first to Honduras and then to Spain. Together, they both inspired me in their relationship as a husband and wife. One thing that they demonstrated to me was how possible it is to be together for more than 66 years and still be as in love with each other as the day they first realized it. No, they weren't perfect. They had their disagreements just like anyone else. And when they did, Tommy was known for saying, "How did a handsome man like me ever meet a beautiful lady like you?" To which June would always respond, "Now don't you go changing the subject." But they both loved the Lord, seeking him as their longest lost treasure. A couple of years ago, June went home to be with the Lord. As for Tommy, he's now back down in Honduras. Alongside their son, he is ministering to police officers down there as a chaplain. And by the way, I believe that he is now about to turn 90 years old. And though he's not quite as youthful as he used to be, he's still plugging away. But really, because of all of this and more, Tommy is one man for whom I'd always go out of my way to seek wisdom. And also, it is from Tommy that I've learned a lot of the refranes that I know, including the ones that I was sharing as I opened this. Most of the time that I've spent with Tommy actually hasn't been in the form of watching him teach a lesson. Indeed, the influence he's had has been more through just hanging out with him. Nevertheless, the Lord has used him as an inspiration in my life as such. And I know that he's done this for many others as well. It's who he is. Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me with whom you hang out, and I will tell you who you are. How about you? As you've moved along in the journey to where you are today, who have been some teachers and other role models who have inspired you along the way in such a way that you were compelled to take on what you learned from them as your own? And why? Both in the classroom and beyond the classroom. As the example you would endeavor to set overall as a witness for Christ. The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. Inasmuch in Luke, this was a sobering admonition which Jesus was making to his disciples about the Pharisees. In a more general sense, the principle has to do with the ability to impact and inspire as a teacher all of those who are coming behind you. Not just as an educator toward the noble end of their intellectual growth, but also in terms of who you are to the greater end of who they would be, even spiritually. And with that, I leave you with a final question. And this is for you to put into your pocket and ponder on. When it comes to these things for your learners, who is it that you'd like to be? Not only for those who study under you at school, but also others with whom you are able to set an example elsewhere and in other ways, beyond the classroom. You are in the best position to make a difference. Perhaps even so eternally for Christ. The student is not above the teacher, but for everyone who is fully trained, they will be like their teacher. For your learners, who is it that you would like to be? Camarón que se duerme, se lo lleva el corriente. Seize the day. No better time than